The signal resolved into static on the 44th day of the Velthari survey cycle, at the third watch, while I was alone. I had been alone for most of the last 90 years. That is not a complaint. It is simply the condition of the work. The survey vault does not require company. It requires patience, precision, and a willingness to sit with things that do not change for long stretches and then change entirely in a moment you cannot predict. I had made my peace with that arrangement before my third posting. By my ninth, I barely noticed it. What I noticed on the 44th day was the silence. Not the silence of the vault itself. The vault is always quiet. That is what vaults are for. I mean the silence on the channel I had been keeping open for 11 years, the narrowband carrier wave that originated from the third planet of a yellow-class star on the far edge of the outer reach, in the sector that every chart in every archive on every inhabited world in the known galaxy marked with the same notation: survey suspended. Do not approach. Status: unresolved. 11 years I had kept that channel open. 11 years I had been the only archivist in the continuance survey willing to listen. Every other keeper I had known had transferred their watch or redacted the frequency from their active logs entirely. They were not cowards. They were careful. There is a difference, and I learned to respect it even when I did not share it. But I had stayed. And on the 44th day, at the third watch, the carrier wave, which had been present, continuous and faint for longer than my career, stopped. I checked the equipment twice, then a third time. I ran the diagnostic array through its full sequence, which takes 11 minutes when there are no errors. There were no errors. The equipment was functioning correctly. The frequency simply had nothing on it anymore. What had been there was not there. The distinction matters in the atlas. You do not record silence the same way you record absence. One is a condition of transmission. The other is a condition of the transmitter. I opened the atlas to the relevant page. The entry for the third planet of the yellow-class star in the outer reach was the longest single entry in the atlas of inhabited worlds. It had been accumulating for over 400 years, contributed to by 31 keepers before me, and it ran to 9 dense columns of notation, cross-reference, and addendum. Most of it was about what the planet's inhabitants had done. A smaller portion was about what the rest of the galaxy had done in response. The smallest portion, a single line at the very top, entered by the first keeper to survey the sector, read: designation, human; classification, inhabited; recommendation, observe and do not interfere. That recommendation had been updated across 4 centuries and 31 keepers to read: observe from maximum safe distance; do not approach; do not transmit; do not respond to transmission. And below that, in my own notation style, added 11 years ago when I had opened the watch channel against the advice of my senior colleagues: carrier wave active. Monitoring. I looked at that line for a long time. Then I drew my stylus and wrote below it, in the careful block notation the atlas requires for terminal entries: carrier wave resolved, signal ceased, date and watch recorded, status revised. I paused before I wrote the final classification. In the atlas, terminal classification is permanent. It cannot be amended, only annotated. Once I wrote it, the entry would be closed. I thought about the last transmission I had received on that channel. Not the last ever transmission. The humans had been transmitting in various forms for as long as the survey had been keeping records of them, and the archive held centuries of it, cataloged and sealed behind access protocols that had been progressively restricted until only 3 keepers in the continuance survey had clearance to read any of it. I was one of those 3. The others had retired. I was the last. The last transmission I had personally logged was not a war broadcast. It was not a fleet command relay. It was not anything the galaxy might have expected from a species that had, over the course of 4 centuries, caused the complete reclassification of 3 inhabited sectors, the permanent withdrawal of 2 elder species survey fleets, and the unilateral adoption of a navigation exclusion zone that no galactic transit authority had ever formally mandated. but that every pilot in the outer reach treated as binding law. It was a voice, one voice, speaking quietly in a language I had spent 4 decades learning to parse, to someone who was not on the channel, someone who was not transmitting, someone who may not have been present at all, or may have been present once and was not anymore. The voice spoke slowly, with long pauses, the way a person speaks when they are not expecting an answer and have accepted that condition. It spoke about a light on the water and a name it kept returning to. Not a name from any catalog I could match. A personal designation, the kind that does not survive the person it belongs to. I had listened to that transmission 47 times over the 11 years since I received it. I will not reproduce it here. That is my decision, and I will not be argued out of it. What I will record is this: the voice was not afraid. That was the thing I kept coming back to. Every other piece of human origin transmission in the sealed archive, and I had read all of it, over 40 years of clearance carried, in some form, the register of a species that understood the universe was large and did not necessarily wish them well, and had decided to proceed anyway. The voice on the channel did not carry that. It carried something quieter. Something that had already finished deciding and was now simply present in the aftermath of that decision. I did not have a word for it in Velthari. I am not certain any language in the survey's catalog had a word for it. It was not defiance. It was not resignation. It was somewhere else entirely. I wrote the terminal classification. I closed the entry. I set the stylus down. The vault was very quiet. I have filed a great many terminal entries in 90 years of service, more than most keepers reach in a full career. Species collapse, sector abandonment, signal decay, voluntary withdrawal, the atlas accumulates them steadily, and it is the keeper's duty to record them without editorializing, to keep the notation clean and the classification accurate and the personal response, whatever it is, separate from the record. That is what the training requires, and it is correct. The record is not for the keeper. The record is for whoever reads it next. But I sat for a long time after I closed that entry, longer than I should have, by the survey's standards of watch discipline. I sat and I looked at the channel display, which was now reading no signal on the frequency, and I thought about something one of my senior colleagues had said to me when I first opened the watch, 11 years ago. She had told me I was wasting a monitoring resource on a dead frequency, and that I would get nothing from it. She had not been wrong, exactly. She had simply not been right in the way she intended. What I got from it was 11 years of knowing the carrier wave was there, knowing that on the far edge of the outer reach, in the sector no chart recommended approaching and no pilot approached voluntarily, something was still transmitting, still present, still, and I use the word carefully, aware of what it implies, still keeping watch. The galaxy had organized itself around the humans for 400 years, not around their territory, not around their capabilities, around the idea of them. The sealed sectors and the restricted archives and the transit exclusion zones and the navigation advisories and the elder species survey withdrawals and the careful, elaborate, unspoken agreement among every inhabited world in the known galaxy to simply not discuss what had happened in the outer reach. All of it was organized around the idea that the humans were there, present, watching back. I had not understood, until the carrier wave resolved into static, what that meant. The galaxy had not been afraid of the humans, not exactly. Fear requires a specific object, a vector, a trajectory, a thing that is coming from a particular direction at a particular time. What the galaxy had organized itself around was not fear. It was orientation. The humans were the fixed point, the thing the charts curved around without acknowledging the curve. The thing that told every other species, by its silence and its persistence and its continued presence at the edge of the known, where the boundary was. And now the carrier wave was gone. I sat in the survey vault on Velthari Prime, alone, in the third watch of the 44th day, and I waited for the silence to tell me what came next. It did not tell me anything, it simply continued. That was the last entry I filed in the Atlas of Inhabited Worlds before I requested transfer to archive-only duty. My replacement has kept the watch on the channel since then. I am told the frequency remains clear. No signal, no carrier wave, nothing that requires classification. I have not listened to it again. Some silences you only need to hear once to understand that you already know what they mean.